The Savage Land Battle Pass has been here for just over a week, and so it is finally time to take a look at our first ever tier list for the Savage Land season, and let you know what we think the current best decks in Marvel Snap are to be climbing up that ladder. Now there's an important disclaimer to give you this week around. We want to talk about how diverse the season is right now. For the most part, people are still experimenting with new cards. This season is 5 weeks long. Deck builders have no pressure to grind the ladder quickly, and people are taking their time and enjoying an alleviated amount of pressure, encouraging diversity overall. This diversity is something that we want to talk about when it comes to the first tier list of this season. We don't want to talk about decks, but about archetypes. We don't want to talk about cards, but about concepts, for the simple reason that the Marvel Snap metagame is all over the place right now. The new decks are being refined, and the old ones are figuring out how they should adapt to new emerging builds. As a result, nothing is set in stone this week, and I would like this tier list to serve as more of an inspiration to you, backed up with a bit of data that we have access to, more than a hard recommendation of the decks you should be playing. Also important to note this week, we're going to try and keep this video a little more concise thanks to community feedback overall. For that reason, deck lists will be exportable from the article in the description box down below, and if you're looking for potential replacements for these archetypes, we have a complete list available to you in the article. Go check it out. I will not be reading it out on video this time around. Additionally, if you're looking for play patterns, how the decks work and how you want to play them, they're also available for you in the article, so I highly encourage you to click that and give it a look. There's a lot to talk about here in the first week of the Savage Lands, and maybe even more that we haven't figured out yet. So if you haven't already, please do subscribe to the channel. Would love to see you for more Marvel Snap content in the future. Just before we dive into this meta game, we want to take a second to thank the sources of this tier list and the people who help put it together. Of course, Marvel Snap Pro and ourselves, in combination with Pro Meta, have been working on our Marvel Snap tracker for about a month and a half now. The data coming in is proving to be very helpful, of course, although it is limited to Windows only at this time. If you want to be helping influence this data pool, you can download it now from a link in the description box down below, but the info from this tracker is proving to be very helpful in informing these tier lists. SnapFan and the SnapFan community Discord server, of course, always fantastic for helping us in figure out what's what in the Marvel Snap metagame. Snapdex over on Twitter, retweeting all you guys having success and finding Infinite early, and of course all the players who are offering their insight and time to come and chat with us also inform this tier list by letting us know how your journey went. With all that said and done, let's head on over into the tier list for this week. As always, in the video form of the tier list, we're not going to be looking to cover tier 4 or budget options on video. There are actually some fantastic decks making a showing here and turning up for the first time and offering you some options if you perhaps have a limited card pool in the budget tier, or you're looking for something a little bit more outgoing in tier number 4. So if you're looking for information about these or exportable deck lists, they are available with every other deck list you see in this video in the article written by DenCCG in the comments section down below. So come and give it a click, go take a look and see what's up down there if you want to check out any of those decks. Tier number 3 this week, however, consists of a good chunk of decks. Not a ton of movement here, but a new addition to join the pack. Zabu Control finding itself as a tier 3 option alongside Cerebro 2, Zerocula and Thanos Zoo this time around. Tier 2 also finds itself with a brand new addition joining itself, this time at the very top of the pack. Galactus finding itself as a firm option in the face of all these Zabu decks. Patriot Surfer, a deck we covered in a video yesterday that some people had neglected to remember, putting up a good showing here and turning up in tier number 2. She-Hulk Baero, the kind of de facto best deck of Snap for a very long time, still a very valid choice and finding itself in tier 2 this week. Electro Ramp, my personal favourite archetype that was shining into Luke's bar just a few days ago, a tier 2 option moving forward as well. Negative Surfer, of course, once again a previous kingpin of Snap, still a very valid choice this time around and a very fun deck to play, finds itself in tier 2 right now. And last but not least, Zabu Dawkhawk, possibly the best Zabu deck we have seen so far, finding itself at the top of tier 2 with room to improve and refine. Last but not least, we take a look at the 3 decks that have a hold over Tier 1. Sera Surfer, the comfort choice for a lot of people, finding itself still referred to as the best deck in the game at the minute. Still a fantastic way to climb up that ladder. Much the same, Shuri Zero holding firm at the top of the tier list, a deck many people have indeed previously enjoyed and can see the power of with Shuri moving forward. However, the good cards deck that has previously been a Tier 2 staple is moving itself up. It's hard to contest just how popular this deck is in the metagame right now in its various varieties, and it's carrying many people to an early infinite birth. As a result, it seems fair to pull this one up to join the other 2 Tier 1 decks. We've decided it's time to add a tier explanation to this article and video to help you understand exactly what each tier represents when it comes to a deck being positioned there moving forward. Tier 1, of course, represents the decks that have all the upside you would be looking for to rack up cubes. These make a lot of sense matchup-wise in the current metagame, offer different play patterns during a match, and often have explosive and surprising sides to them. These should be decks worth investing in order to continue climbing in the coming week. Tier 2 are the very good decks that potentially have a weakness holding them back right now, either not being as reliable in its draws as Tier 1 options, is countered by another popular deck, or is still a work in progress at this moment in time. A good pilot can probably take these and have the same results as they would with a Tier 1 deck, but their concepts and play patterns are more difficult to exploit compared to the tier above. Tier 3 is the tier that's made up of decks with a strong purpose. They're not making particular sense in the current metagame, or requiring much more investment or knowledge in order to have the same results as higher tier decks. Usually Tier 3 decks will be a mix of decks that are on the rise, which don't have much data about themselves, and old archetypes that are on the decline, and then some niche decks in there for the current metagame. Tier 4 is there for the off-meta decks that have fallen off in recent memory, and the budget decks, of course, are there for cards that only come from Pool 1 and Pool 2, but are still capable of competing for an experienced pilot that has a similar collection level rank and MMR range. You can see our matchmaking guide if you want more information about exactly how that works. So let's start breaking down each of these decks for folks who want more details about what they look like and how they work. Of course, Sera Surfer remains mostly unchanged this week. The deck list seems to have been pretty refined at this point. The best deck from the previous metagame does not seem to have slowed down for the start of the new season, with most of the attention being on Zabu for the first week of play. Silver Surfer was free to roam the ladder and do a ton of damage in the process. It also helps to be the deck most people knew how to play already, but it is even better to be ignored after being the focus of last month. For now, it seems like Silver Surfer remains a better card than Zabu, especially because Zabu needs to be played earlier in a match for its true power to be seen. Silver Surfer instead can be drawn on turn 6 and contribute perfectly to your deck, while Zabu can often be unplayable after turn 4 depending on the hand that you draw. We will see how the Season Pass cards match up moving forward into next week. Shuri Zero, a fantastic option for this week as well. Shuri gained a lot of attention at the end of December as players start to realise how much power she's able to develop. Now the card is considered one of the most valuable in Series 5. This deck probably has a lot to do with that, as Shuri shines in it so much so that it pushed players to try playing Zabu in this deck. For now, the deck is benefiting a lot from Shang-Chi not being a super popular card. Most decks are focusing on themselves or countering Zabu or Silver Surfer. As a result, Shuri is able to express her full potential and will usually win a game that is solely about generating a ton of points. The Good Cards deck makes another appearance in Tier 1 this week. Early in the season, this archetype kinda has everything a grinder could possibly wish for. It's built around some solid standalone cards, making the play patterns very easy to visualize, which limits the mistakes that one of you can make. It's also exceptionally flexible to fit into different environments and has proven to be reliable enough to climb the ladder at all ranks. I would expect this deck to dip to high tier 2 next week once other archetypes start getting more refined and can develop their synergies to their full potential, but currently, good cards and Sera Surfer builds are probably the go-to decks for anyone who does not have Zabu, or who doesn't want to work on new concepts just yet. Apart from Zabu archetypes, they are easily the most popular decks on the ladder right now among already existing archetypes, representing close to 10% of a metagame share each. Moving down into tier number 2, Zabu Dawkhawk is the new addition to the list. Quite easily one of the more expensive decks in Marvel Snap right now, given the need for several Series 4 and 5 cards, but truly a powerhouse to be reckoned with. Zabu Dawkhawk could be considered a tier 1 deck in my opinion in the right hands, because many players have already reached Infinite with similar decks already. However, considering the deck is very new and it's unclear what the best iteration for it is so far, we still have some consistency issues to figure out, so tier 2 seems like a reasonable place for this one right now. Currently, Zabu represents over 20% of the total metagame, but it's being played in different builds, which makes it difficult to assess just how good the card really is. Nevertheless, pairing it with Dawkhawk seems to be the best thing we can do so far, as it represents a good mix of points and the ability to interact with the opponent. The big emphasis in most Zabu decks is how to get Zabu as early and often as possible. America Chavez is being tested in some decks, but in this more proactive build, Crystal is the preferred choice by the player base. Negative Surfer finds itself as the next deck to cover, this one mostly losing popularity at the moment, which might end up being a good thing for it in the end. Mr. Negative suffers a lot from the good cards archetype being popular early in the season, with Cosmo and Leech being staples in that deck. Silver Surfer and Mr. Negative have a really hard time developing their strategy and cannot reliably snap either. Against Shuri or Sera Surfer, the problem is different but not easier to resolve. These matches usually end up in big point shootouts, and Negative usually only wins when he gets the nuts. Otherwise, the average draw from both other decks tends to get there over you, and the opponent snapping you when you don't have Negative in hand often means you have to retreat for safety. Electro Ramp remains a solid choice for players this week. In my book, Electro is the best deck if I had to recommend someone who had no Marvel Snap experience a deck list and they were looking to climb the ladder. The archetype has a very simple play pattern, and though playing only one card a turn, it limits your decisions this way for the pilot. In that regard, Electro Ramp joins the good card archetype as some of the best early performers this season because it's simple to understand in concept and play pattern. Most of the time, landing Electro on turn 3 followed by Leech on turn 4 is going to get nearly every opponent to retreat, and Zabu joining that mix has only made the duo stronger in this forming metagame right now. The trick is simply to know this deck's limitations, as it obviously isn't very flexible in comparison to other decks higher on the tier list. Especially, not finding Electro is going to result in a lot of games where you just need to leave before it is far too late. She-Hulk Baero is still a very valid choice at the moment, but it does seem like the Deathwave golden days might be in the rearview mirror. The deck can still serve as a perfectly fine comfort pick for players. Wave, Aero and Leader are still incredible cards, but have joined other decks and don't seem particularly worse in those. Also, Armor, being a staple 2-drop card in many decks right now, is a big issue, as well as Leader being one of the most popular cards in the game, providing horrible counterplay to your turn 6. I guess Baero is more of a metagame pick than a top contender nowadays. Up next, Patriot Surfer, a deck that I'm a really big fan of at the moment. I don't know how many times that we've written or said that Patriot looks like a great deck that's just felt done when it comes to deck building, and then the deck continues to just innovate and get better and change and become something else entirely. So congratulations to the players who managed to keep being creative and innovative around this one. Patriot Surfer is now our official recommendation on the tier list if you have access to it. The deck simply mixes both synergies. It allows for a very nice little mix that is a headache to solve for the opponent when it comes to reliably guessing how many and where the points will be spread. Indeed, when you are a deck that's all about developing points, being flexible and unpredictable are key traits to succeed in that world. Currently, the tier 1 decks seem to be a little bit problematic for this one. Sera Surfer is more reliable and has a shot at snipping Silver Surfer or Ultron with Cosmo. Shuri Zero can develop its points without being worried about counterplay. And Leech, in the good card deck, can definitely give you a horrible experience with this one if you're not used to playing it. Definitely a deck to keep your eye on though, and definitely one that could continue to thrive as the metagame moves forward. Galactus, of course, another archetype that is continuing to trend upwards at the moment. Galactus remains an interesting choice in the current metagame, looking to punish those highly synergistic decks, looking to play their cards and ignore what you are doing. However, Zabu decks in general have brought back Spider-Man in popularity to the metagame, and that card can cause some hiccups for Galactus strategies. Same could be said for Cosmo, who can just stop this deck in its tracks and counter Galactus' on-reveal effect. Outside of these two problems, the deck still makes a lot of sense. It's very similar to Electro Ramp in the ways that it plays, and once Zabu starts to see less play patterns all around, I would expect Galactus to return to being a solid tier 2 choice, rather than finding itself closer to the bottom. Tier 3 this week, we still have Thanos Zoo finding itself as a viable option here. This deck was picking up in popularity towards the end of the last season, but Thanos Zoo has lost a lot of popularity heading into the Savage Land season, and is still completely unplayable for anyone that does not have Thanos unlocked. We made the decision to include it this week as it feels like one of the stronger decks than the ones that are ranked in tier number 4, and its very flexible nature can catch a lot of opponents by surprise. However, the popularity of Dawkhawk is also an issue for this deck because your deck is going to be larger than most for the majority of the game. Currently, most of the decks are built to be flexible in a way they accomplish their game plan, but only have one game plan really. Thanos Zoo is one of the few decks out there that is both proactive and reactive. It makes it a very special deck in the metagame. For now, it mostly seems like it's hurting the deck, honestly, making it rather complex to pick up, but hopefully it will gain some popularity back as time passes. Zerocula, everyone's favourite budget option with very few pull 3 cards, continuing to still put on a very, very strong showing this month. This very popular iteration of Kazoo in December logically lost a lot of prize as all eyes were on Zabu at the moment and how that could fit into a Zoo shell. However, in my opinion, the deck still has some very strong upsides and might be easily one of the best picks to light up the entire tier list moving forward. It's very easy to pick up and very easy to play. It is very logical that decks without a ton of early upside in the season are suffering from new cards entering the game instead. This is one to keep your eyes on and one that we've covered extensively in a few videos in the past. I highly recommend checking them out if you're interested in the deck's play patterns. Go take a look. Cerebro 2 didn't suffer very much as in comparison to other decks this season, this time around, and its popularity is definitely on par with where it was towards the end of last season. On the other end, Cerebro has a big Scorpion problem. The card kind of dismantles the deck's game plan when played on turn 2, and with Zabu being very popular, you can often be met by a timely Rogue or Enchantress 2 and have your whole game plan kind of spoofed in one quick move. If the trend continues moving forward, there's a good chance this deck is moving down to tier 4 next week. But for now, it's one that people continue to enjoy and continue to have some amount of success with at the moment on the Marvel Snap ladder. So well worth picking up if you don't mind being a little soft to Scorpion, Rogue, or Enchantress. The newer deck in this tier, Zabu Control, one that Den has been working on quite extensively, has shared on Twitter a number of times to much praise and success from the community. While Shuri and Dawkhawk are the clear cut-out stars alongside Zabu for now, the Control core makes a lot of sense with this card. Considering most of the key cards in this deck are 4-cost cards, the deck is super flexible in the way it can react to the opponent once Zabu is in play. However, compared to other decks with Zabu, this one can quickly struggle if it doesn't find the signature card or misjudges some element of the game. Marvel Snap is a game where small mistakes can quickly derail your entire game and 6 turns go very fast. As a result, purely reactive decks can lose a lot of games simply because their opponent don't have to think as much in order to play optimally. And that really shows with Zabu, as the proactive builds around the card have been much more popular and performing much better for this first week. In order to make this deck work, it's really important to raise the stakes whenever you feel like you can win with a double Spider-Man combo, or have a clear read on how to counter your opponent's turn 6. Otherwise, we can be quickly bleeding cubes and abandon the archetype shortly afterwards. Worth noting that the previous Sera Control deck also kind of makes sense here if you prefer a different flavour of control, but definitely packs less high roll compared to the current Zabu builds. If you enjoy this kind of thing, it's not suddenly unplayable, but in terms of recommending a control strategy, we do think the Zabu one is slightly more proactive. With a balance patch likely to drop very, very soon, and a lot left to figure out with Zabu from some Series 5 cards in combination with it, the start of the Savage Lands is proving to be a wild one for sure. For now, I would clearly give the nod to the solid decks of December, who seem to benefit a lot from not needing to learn their intricacies to start climbing with them. But we all saw the leaks about potential changes, and we know that Baero, Leader, and Galactus are listed in there, so who knows how their decks will react to these cards being a little bit weaker. We'll of course keep you posted with all these developments in next week's tier list. If you want to get in touch with us before then, the best thing you can do is find us over on Twitter at the Marvel Snap Zone. Come and find us at DenCCG or HowlingMines if you want to talk to the two of us personally, or come and join the community Discord if you prefer, and chat with thousands of other players about Marvel Snap 24 hours a day. Until next time, I have been HowlingMines, you've been amazing, and this has been the Marvel Snap Zone tier list for week 1 of the Savage Lands.